Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic, let's do it. What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I once went camping, and in the middle of the night, I heard this ungodly noise. Picture a mix of a chainsaw and a banshee. Turns out it was just a raccoon arguing with a trash can, but for a good 10 seconds I was mentally drafting my apology to Bigfoot for doubting his existence. Lesson learned. Nature can be scarier than any horror movie soundtrack. Working at a liquor store near closing time, I was walking out of the walk-in cooler thinking a customer had come into the store. I met a man wearing a ski mask that pointed a gun inches from my face. Needless to say, I was getting robbed. When I was about 11, my sister was babysitting next door. Mom was at work. My mom called me, woke up, and told me to lock up the house and go next door so my sister could watch me as well, and then a storm was coming. I got dressed, grabbed a few things, and locked the door. By this time it was, thunder and lightninging. I ran down the front steps, ran across the driveway, and then our yard. I was so close to the neighbor's yard that I slipped and face-planted. The very second I lifted my head, a bolt of lightning struck the neighbor's driveway. I felt a sort of jolt go through my body. Once it registers, I was fine. I ran to the front door. It scared me so much that I never go outside when I see lightning, and I'm terrified at the sound of thunder. I hit a semi with a train, compressed and ruptured the long-haul fuel tanks, and they exploded. Blew the side window frame into my seat. I was thrown across the cab of the locomotive. Truck wedged under the front of the motor while fire poured in through my window. Couldn't get out until we finally stopped. Guillain-Barré syndrome went from a fit young apprentice to a 90-year-old man within a week. And then there was the paralysis, where you feel everything, you just can't move. I got to a point in my illness where I was so isolated and so physically weak that I thought there would soon come a point where I would not be able to get out of the bed and would die before anyone found me. I've lived through major multiple earthquakes and fires. Northern California, FTW. One was the 1989 Loma Prieta quake, which hit just a few days before my 13th birthday. Seemed to last forever, even though it was only like 25 seconds of actual shaking. Then I was in Las Vegas near the top of the MGM Grand when a 7.1 quake hit in 29 Palms. Since those tall buildings are retrofit, they sway in a quake. So when you're at the top, it's like being violently flung back and forth. Incredibly scary. Went down to the casino floor once it all stopped and people were just gambling away like nothing happened. Once, my phone auto-corrected my ex's name to Mom in a text. I sent it without realizing. The horror of explaining that technological glitch to both parties is a level of fear no horror movie can match. My thumbs have never betrayed me so brutally. Someone drugged my drink a couple of weeks ago. I didn't finish the drink, luckily, but I still can't remember most of the night. It was so scary I didn't realize the extent of it until the next day. I was really sick. I still feel so scared. I feel like I can never go out alone again. I'm really upset about it. I went on a nighttime booze cruise on a lad's holiday and fell down the slide that they use for the daytime parties for swim stops. I can't really remember how it happened, but it was pitch black off the coast of Cyprus somewhere, and I was near enough blackout drunk, hit the water, and had to watch the boat cruise away from me with the music blaring. I had to get rescued by the Coast Guard. 25 minutes I was in the water. I taught myself to swim after that. One Saturday when I was 6, my mom won tickets to a concert on the radio for that night. She last minute arranged for us to be babysat by our pop at his place. Usually he would come to our place, but it was last minute. We just stayed there while she went home, got ready, and went out. Later that night, a drunk driver drove through our house, starting in my bedroom at one end of the house, taking out my brother's room and then the lounge room. If my mom didn't go out that night, we would all be dead. If my pop came and babysat us at our place, my brother, my pop, and I would all be dead. Wild. So either you believe in coincidences, or you just think that everything happens for a reason. So, by that logic, that was pretty wild, and glad your family's okay. So, good thing your mom won those tickets. I was in a high-rise building on the 36th floor that overlooks a river in Edmonton during the tornado that hit in the city in the 80s. We had no idea that there was a tornado, and we were literally out on the balcony watching the river's waves rising up like a wall. I was 14 and had no fear. In 1996, I was living in the mountains of Lebanon. I was on my rooftop getting some sun while reading a Robert Ludlum book, if you know, you know. I was at a party and a part in the story where characters were firing at each other, and I felt like I could hear and feel what was going on. Realistic. Well, my friend came up on the roof and screamed at me, "Are you crazy? They're bombing us. Get inside." Turns out, I was feeling like everything was real because it was. Israel was flying over the valley that I was overlooking, and when I looked up, I saw 3 planes drop bombs on the towns down below. There was no war at the time. Israel just liked flying over Lebanon every few months, drop a bunch of bombs on power plants and water treatment facilities, then fly home in time for supper. I moved back to Canada 3 months later. When I was 5 years old, I had a neighbor who was 6, and we were friends. I also had 2 pet guinea pigs who disappeared one night. Whilst my family was searching to find the guinea pigs, my neighbor friend suggested we look underneath a specific tree. Everyone ignored him and continued searching with no success. The next day, my father was walking around the garden, noticed the tree had some dirt that was weirdly dislodged. He dug a little and then came across our 2 dead guinea pigs. Was a happy, energetic teen, then got sick. Told it was a virus, kept getting sicker and sicker. Doctor said the virus was gone. Kept testing, nothing came up. But I got worse and worse, to the point I started getting scared I was going to die before they figured it out. I had no energy, was in constant agony. My brain wouldn't work properly, could barely eat or stay awake. Months of this, and doctors couldn't figure it out, and started implying, then telling me I was either an attention-seeking brat or crazy. That was my breaking point. 8 months of being sick, being suicidal. If I had energy, I probably would have. I got a diagnosis from a doctor my parents had to force me to see. I hated all doctors at this point. MECFS. First 4 years, I wasn't even allowed to have a bath by myself. I couldn't stand for a shower because I'd fall asleep. I fell asleep while walking, eating, in the middle of speaking. I lived on Nurofen for those 4 years. I wet the bed a lot because if I was unconscious for 16 to 22 hours a day. Nothing woke me up, and my eyes wouldn't even flutter when people touched my eyelashes. My parents even asked for a SIDS monitor. The doctor said they could, but if it went off, there was no bringing me back. My body would have given up. I was living in a small rental house 10 years ago. It had 1 bedroom, 1 living room, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and the back door was leading to a narrower enclosure adjacent to which was the neighbor's house. Their bedroom was right next to it. There was a light bulb socket in that small backyard, but I never used that place for anything, so I never put a bulb there. At night, the place always remained very dark. One day, my neighbor told me they could hear movements in my backyard, like someone jumping down from a wall onto the concrete ground. They said it happened on multiple occasions, and they think it was probably a thief. So I bought a CFL bulb and went to put it in there. The socket was very high, and I had to stand on a tall wooden stool to reach there. That night before I went to bed, I switched it on. The switch to the bulb was inside my house, and checked the backyard, which was now fully illuminated. The next morning, I didn't go to the backyard and just switched off the light before going to work. On the second night, when I switched it on again before going to bed, there was no light. It remained dark. I thought the bulb was defective, but was scared of the dark, so I didn't go check that night and decided to check in the morning. When I went there in the morning, the bulb was not in the socket. First I thought the thief stole it, but then I saw the bulb on the ground completely undamaged. There was no way it could have survived a fall from that height. I took the bulb inside and checked. The bulb was working fine. I put the bulb back in the socket and went to work. It was the third night, and when I switched the bulb on, it was working. I went to bed. Around 3 a.m., I went to the back door and slightly opened it to see if the bulb was still working. It was pitch dark. I closed the door quickly and went to sleep. Next morning, found the bulb on the ground again undamaged. I avoided going into the backyard as much as possible from that day and didn't attempt to put any bulb there again. War in Yemen was the scariest thing ever for me. Hearing explosions, gunshots, not knowing from which direction it's coming and if we'll be next. We were hiding inside our house, and when we decided to flee to another place, we only took what we could carry. So scary to run for your life and hearing gunshots, hoping not to be hit. I think there was a dead body on the ground, but I didn't really look, just continued running. I was upstairs in my bedroom with the girl from next door. Her brother came over to let her know their dinner was ready, but instead of just calling out, he decided to pretend he was a robber and started opening and closing all the cupboards and drawers downstairs. We heard him and realized that only a robber would be opening all the cupboards and drawers like that, so we started climbing out of my bedroom window onto the roof to avoid a confrontation. He came up just as we got onto the roof. He sure had us fooled. My dog attack in 2009. I was 7 years old, playing in the front yard of my friend's house. I lived 3 to 4 houses down when her neighbor let their pit bull outside and took it off the leash. The owner went inside. It's still wild to look back on it, but I've written many essays on it. The pit bull's name was Zoe. She was a big pit bull, white and gray. She looked at me and started running towards me. She latched onto my arm and started to shake me like a rag doll. I couldn't do anything but scream in hopes of someone hearing me. My friends were in shock, so they were just standing near the door, jaw dropped, just pure fear in their eyes. My friend's sister opened the door, and my friend's dog, who was a Boston Terrier, ran up Zoe and bit her so she could get off me. My friend's sister picked me up and ran to my house as I was bleeding out. My mom called 911 and the operator told my dad not to put a tourniquet on my arm. Mind you, this is the second time this dog has attacked me. Come to find out, the pit bull popped my brachial artery and I needed surgery ASAP. I ended up getting what's called a brachial artery resection. Recovery was long, got picked on by my classmates, and have a fear of pit bulls and really big dog breeds. I also get bullied or harassed for not liking pit bulls. I don't wish ill on them, I just don't like them. My dad and I were on a pedal boat at one of those beaches in Florida when we see a fin approaching us in the water. Then we hear people on the shore screaming and pointing toward us, and then 2 more fins are popping up out of the water. I still remember my 12-year-old self thinking, oh shit, they're coming to circle our boat and I'm going to die from a shark attack. The crowd watching us went from horror to shouting and cheering, and that's when we realized they were dolphins. When I was about 13 or 14, I was walking home from a friend's house and a car, Escort, was coming towards me. As it got closer, the man slowed down and stared at me, so obviously I was staring back, scared to death, and I could just see and feel the sinister intention of the man. Once it passed me, the driver went to turn around and I took off running through my neighbor's backyards. I was so happy I made it home that night. Me and my wife were in Germany on a vacation and decided to stay in a resort which was slightly off-road, nothing crazy, just 10 to 15 minute drive on a gravel road by the river leading to this beautiful resort. One night coming back from our resort, maps showed another option to go to the resort which I was curious about from a day prior. So took that road, and as we leave the freeway and took that road in the forest, it kept getting narrower and steeper. In 10 minutes, we're on this mountain on a dirt road with nothing in sight. A few minutes later, there's a tree that is right in the middle of the road. Now some backstory. Last night, I had a dream that we're both driving on and off road with trees in the middle, and our car flipped to the side and we both died. Seeing this tree scared the shit out of me. Without telling my wife about the dream, I asked her to get out of the car and help me make a U-turn. It was the hardest U-turn of my life and took over 10 minutes. We'll never forget that experience. Opened my apartment door to a very upset meth dealer pointing a gun in my face. His girlfriend, friend of my roommate, had stolen his stash and run off with some guy. He was livid. For several hours, he searched the apartment in between threatening me. I did everything he asked and answered every question honestly. He finally realized I didn't know where his ex was hiding. Eventually, he left. When he died in jail 6 months later, I could finally breathe again. I was an apprentice at my first job at 17, and when I was wiping the stairs of the shop, a guy on a bike passed by and fell. I rushed down and felt that he didn't have a pulse, so I got my boss, who tried to resuscitate him, and the ambulance got there shortly after. He had a heart attack and sadly didn't make it, so I was the first one to witness his death. That was really scary.